Hi everyone,
Didn't
welcome
that
back.
happen once though?
No, we were just having a little chat while you were
Yeah,
getting ready. So
yeah.
but yeah, welcome back to episode 53 of the Trans and the Mouse, a tongue-in-cheek title. Um, we
What
have
up?
yeah, we have Heather back, who is our probably the most our return guest, the most.
Yeah,
So we're gonna have a little catch up. We're
she's
gonna
the
keep
only
this,
one who can handle all.
yeah, yeah. We're gonna keep
I am
this,
so out of it.
yeah. We're gonna keep this under 2 hours. Um, so yeah, I
We,
suppose,
we we have been known to go on a bit.
yeah, yeah.
I
Um,
think the first one is like closer to 3 hours.
yeah, it is over. In
The
fact,
first time you're.
it's over 2.5
That's
hours.
beautiful.
Yeah, it was
I,
a beautiful accident. I'm sure under different circumstances, we probably could equal that again, but this time
it
around,
was really
no,
funny
under 2 hours.
because it was really funny because even my boyfriend, like when he saw the runtime of it, and he's just like blindly accept everything that I do. But even he was like, "No, this is no, you can't fucking do this. This is impossible. This is inhumane." But then he listened to it, and it was just like, yeah, that was actually a really good talk.
Yeah, I mean there are podcasts out there that do go on for 4 hours.
Some
Um,
like Lord of the Rings epic.
yeah. I mean
What you don't you
it's
don't want
not
this to be you don't want this to be fucking EFAP of the
no
trans people.
no. Um, but I mean a lot of things have happened. I mean a lot of things happened prior to the new year. Um, things are already have started, especially if we look into what the Republicans are trying to push early on. Um,
Yeah,
they're trying to ban trans girls from playing sports, and they're trying to stop people from
I'm
living a
sorry.
life.
As, I'm sorry. Have we just been like stuck in a fucking time loop? It's just Groundhog's Day. Are we back in the beginning of 2024? Jesus fucking Christ! Life is a nightmare that just goes on.
Um, but that's the format. That's the plot that the Republicans like to use because they are seeing the time warp. You know, because
Yeah,
they want it to go back to the good old days, not realizing that the good old days wasn't that great.
the good old days fucking suck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I
Like
mean,
unless you happen to be, and even then, like even if you happen to be like one of the three people alive that actually had some fucking rights, like even then it fucking sucked for you. Like things are better the less shit they are for other people, the better they are for you as well. Like that's just general rule at this point.
Yeah, I was watching back some that just came up at something I was looking at and some old clips from when Trump had just been elected first time round. And
Jesus
it
fucking
took
Christ, it's bleak that we can say that.
yeah, and it took me a moment to register that I wasn't watching something current.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That that happened to like me last Torin was reading this news story from last year, and I kind of missed the fact that it was last year.
yeah. I
Just
was reading,
assumed it was right now.
yeah, I was reading a bill. The Republicans tried to. I think it was either passed or it didn't quite make the passing grade. Um,
Yeah.
from last year, and the
It
reason
was
why,
too shit for the worst
yeah,
shit. Like that. Like, Jesus fucking
yeah,
Christ.
the reason why I brought it up is because, in my opinion, I think that they will try and pass that bill, which is why I brought it up to remind everyone. But I mean, yeah, I mean, talking about Donald Trump, I mean, for fuck's sake, I remember watching a clip of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. They were both at a party, and Jesus Christ, you have Donald Trump doing doing this, and you had Elon Musk like bopping his head, like two old fogies dancing.
I mean,
Like,
Elon Musk. I
like
mean, the thing that stands out to me with him is like he's the richest man on the face of the planet,
yeah,
and his own daughter has disowned him. Now, however moral and righteous you might think you are, like if my dad was the richest man on the face of the planet, it would, my morals would bend. I'll be honest, my morals would bend somewhat before I got to the
Oh,
point of disowning. Like, how bad have you got to be to go? I stand to inherit the wealth of the planet's richest individual, and nah, you're all right. You can keep it.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I would.
There's a special level of awful to
yeah,
I would.
that point.
There. I do not see how much of a shit dad you would have to be. Like, I disowned my dad because he was a fucking drunk when I was 14. Like, I, I had it easy. Like, that was an easy choice to make.
yeah,
That fucking
But if I mean, and I say this as a disclaimer, my dad is I have a wonderful father, so just
Yeah.
but if I'm very fortunate in that sense. But if if my dad was the world's richest man, he could be a fairly high level of prick before I would get to the point of cutting contact.
Oh yeah,
I,
yeah,
I could probably put quite a lot to one side. However,
yeah.
otherwise
Oh, like
moral I think I am, that's got to be a fairly large incentive.
yeah,
yeah, that damage done to the population of the planet, contra the fact that I could basically not work for the entire rest of my life. Yeah, I'm sorry, I am prone to not working.
Yeah.
yeah,
And you'd think of all how life changing that could be, and you're just like,
Yeah.
you're all right. I'll pass, thanks.
yeah,
And
How you get fucked, and then dresses him down in like the most magnificent fucking sense.
yeah, because we see, with anyone, what you see online and what you see in the media is never the whole story. It's always got a
no,
narrative to it.
yeah,
But it's that relationship or lack of relationship with his daughter that I think is the most telling.
yeah. It's like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. It's like, I'm not equating this to what's happening in Israel. And I'm not doing that. So for those haters who watch this, please don't come for me. But
This is very
but
exciting.
what's happening in California, in LA, is terrible. Like, I feel for those people. But the amount of news time that has gotten, where what's
Yeah,
happening in Israel
yeah,
was silent, is like, you do know you can cover what's happening in LA, and you can also cover what's happening in Israel at the same time.
Yeah.
But like you said, that's not how media works.
No, and even
Mm,
within that, the attention that we've focused on Palestine, and
Yeah,
rightly so, but where's the focus on Sudan? Where's the focus on the Uyghur who've been wiped out? We seem to have forgotten about the Russians and Chechnya. So
yeah,
there's always that media bias on for their decisions on which stories get the airtime. Yeah, and there is always
yeah,
inherent bias in that.
yeah,
yeah. What's interesting right now? What gets people going? Fuck, this started bleak.
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we started just before we started recording with Happy New Year, and we were
yeah,
pretty much like we're not really sure if that's the right phrasing at this
yeah,
point
yeah,
because we're less than 2 weeks in and it's gone to shit
Happy,
already.
yeah,
happy new fear.
yeah. And it's like, I never. I mean, I never, and I'm sure, like, I'm not going to speak. I'm not going to speak for Max because I never do that because I'm not an arsehole. But I would think that
I
they
am.
are all anti-media when it comes to the news, right? Because it's the way it's a monopoly, right? They like to play with people's lives, when Mr. Puckadanus actually becomes into power, I'm interested in seeing what he's going to do with Project 2025. I want to see what's in the pipeline.
I think this is where they're particularly dangerous. Is that I absolutely have critique to make of the mainstream media and how they operate, but there is an element of they're not solely controlled by one megalomaniac. They may be inherently biased and subject to all sorts of issues. But what you've got with both Trump and Musk is that they're the way that one individual can buy the media. When Trump set up his own sort of Truth Social and Musk with X, and he now seems to be trying to buy himself into, well, he has bought himself into political power. And, it's the old adage of sort of money corrupts, but I think if you give anyone that sort of level of monopoly and ultimate power and domination, and I think there's something to be said now about what we're doing now with the podcast and about social media and citizen journalism, and I think that's where it's really concerning, is because historically there was no alternative to the mainstream narrative. Like, it wasn't within our gift as individuals to, you might publish a local zine or something, but you weren't going to publish a sheet newspaper that was going to take on the Times or the Guardian. You weren't going to start up your own TV channel. Whereas now you can have a reasonably broad reach online presence, and you can have a social media site or a blog or a YouTube or whatever it may be that reaches a lot of people. So that makes it more difficult for the mainstream media to out and out lie, because we have the power to challenge that. But when you've got, one of the biggest sites, Twitter, being bought by Musk, and that being damaged in that way, and then you've got the absolute shit show that's happened with Meta in the past week. That freedom that we've had over the past decade and a half is now being severely damaged, and I think that's really concerning. Especially when it's it's taken away sort of marginalized voices. So if you look what's happened with X and Meta, you're seeing marginalized people being unsafe remaining on there if they choose to, or for a lot of people just simply deactivating and withdrawing. So those voices just get silenced.
Yeah, and like Twitter was like a big practically nobody used it, but anyone who used it was like fucking journalistically competent, like back in the day. Like, it was a fucking big site for news. It was a big site for journalists to just, and it was good. It was so good at it, and then like Musk decides to ruin it all. Like, Jesus fucking Christ! Talk about kicking away a fucking.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sort of stepping back a bit from it, sort of over the back half of last year, and then I did just over the Christmas period. I did my sort of final. That's it. I'm off. Because I had to get round to updating the feeds on my website and stuff that I've been putting off for ages. But I've done that now. I've done the final leaving. But there's something now this week that feels more difficult, because you were like, well, I can I had a fairly large platform on Twitter, and it was thinking, well, I've got to start again from scratch somewhere else. And I've built that following up over 15 years, so that's not going to happen overnight. But to then take away Meta as well, and that's obviously Facebook and Instagram and Threads and WhatsApp, it's not taking away one platform. This now feels like, well, actually, if we step back from Meta, we're stepping back from social media almost in its entirety. And that feels a lot different in terms of, and it doesn't matter which one came first. I think if Twitter had still been okay and Meta had gone first, we could have all stepped back from that and gone, oh, well, we've still got Twitter.
Yeah.
And I know that we've got
both of them.
We've got the other platforms that are in their place. I mean, I'm now being, to be honest, just as addicted to Blue Sky as I previously was to Twitter.
Yeah.
But
I still haven't gotten, but like, I'm addicted to getting suspended. I think like that's just, there's something about it. Like, oh, I need to keep being suspended from this fucking shithole of a place. I'm on my 19th account right now. I've gotten so, it just keeps happening.
Yeah.
And I keep cackling anytime it
I think
happens.
it all went wrong. We were joking about it earlier about when we left MySpace. We should have just stuck with MySpace. This is our punishment for abandoning Tom.
Yeah, well, he kind of forced himself on us. We joined there, and he was just like in our friend, and we couldn't delete him. Like, that's a bad move. That's a dumb idea. That's a bad move. It's like, I have the most friends on MySpace. Like, yeah, because everyone needs to be your friend, you fucking parasocial demon.
Yeah.
I didn't know I felt this strongly about Tom.
Yeah. Obviously, you know, and Max knows that I'm on Blue. I'm now on Blue Sky as well. I will gradually move over there more permanently. But for the time being, I'm still going to use Twitter. I know it's become a shit show, a total flipping nuke platform.
Gemma is kind of like, one of the reasons that I'm not that active on Blue Sky is because I've seen other people being lectured on how they behave, and like I'm Torin saw how I reacted to being lectured on how I behave.
Yeah,
they do have the tags on there. So there's an I've seen some people like, and some of it is, you know, tags it as this is a spam account or whatever that's useful. But there's one on there that tags as rude, and I'm just like, yeah, it's just, I think if people aren't, you know,
me being
discriminatory or whatever, but if someone's a bit sweary, that doesn't bother me.
Yeah,
and like, yeah, look, if I'm just tagged as rude, I'm doing something wrong. I am, but like, because there was this. Just the other, like, I think it was New Year's Eve actually, because I think I have to leave now and go have a threesome because I'm angry, which is logical train of events. But there was this one person who like started scolding me because I behaved poorly to TERFs.
Yeah,
and I decided to ruin her fucking night.
Yeah.
I generally don't think you need to. I mean, I generally avoid people who aren't worthy of me wasting my time with them. But I don't think, you know, bigots have earned respect. You know, so if you, if you dedicate your life to attacking marginalized people and discriminating and harassing people, then
I'm going to
you
dedicate
probably
my life
can't
to
expect
attacking
people
you.
to be very nice to you. Yeah. I'm much more of an ignore rather than waste my breath on them. But for people who tell them to go forth and multiply, then, you know.
And like this person decided to. It was a great idea to say that when they start like rounding us up, that'll be on you.
Yeah.
I
That
remember
go
that.
down nicely with me. So I kind of shouted at her for like 14 messages or something.
Yeah. Was this the same person who was a part of the very same community.
Yeah. She thought
Doesn't
we
surprise me.
were standing next to each other on the front line. Which I like. That's not my battle. I will never ally myself with anyone who decides to treat me like a fucking misbehaving child because I step out of line. Fuck that.
Yeah.
That's not my battle.
Yeah, but that's
Uh,
what you have to come to expect now. I mean, there isn't a day that goes by where someone is getting either misgendered, called a groomer, a paedophile. It's just become a shit show. Like,
yeah, they're so
as of
fucking
late,
boring as well. Like
yeah,
unimaginative fucking cunts.
yeah. I mean, as
Yeah,
of late,
I mean,
I've
I've
been,
said this before. I mean, I obviously having a, and I sort of acknowledge that I am not the most marginalised member of the community. You know, I am a queer woman, but I'm also, a white, able-bodied, cis,
yeah,
but I do have a large platform, so I sometimes can attract some unpleasant people. I stopped
Oh, you
counting.
don't say.
I stopped counting the death threats that I'd received after my 400th.
yeah,
And but for me personally, like, I'm a heavy user of the block button. I ignore them. I'm like, well, waste your time on me just being shouting into the ether rather than someone who's going to get upset by it. But there was a point where you just go, you've just DM'd me saying to kill myself. I've got a 17-page torture fantasy here. You're not even trying.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah,
And
yeah.
but
where's the
joking
creativity?
aside, like, you don't know the vulnerability of the person that's on the other side of that screen. And
No,
obviously having a
No.
background in youthwear, thinking of, I'd see some of this stuff that was sent in my direction and think, God, if that was sent to some of the young people that we were working with, the
That would be
impact that could
fucking
have on them.
ruinous.
yeah. That's the thing that gets like. That's what gets me. Like with these like people who clearly don't have a brain or don't have enough foresight to understand that the people that they're attacking, whether your beliefs, right, or whether you want to believe that they are a trans woman or not, which I don't really give a fuck if you don't, but if that's your belief system, like you're attacking a vulnerable member.
Yeah, you're
Like,
attacking
like
you're attacking a person, you
yeah,
fucking
Yeah.
monster.
if same way if you attack a cis woman who is a vulnerable woman, especially given the fact that obviously given your background and I don't, it's common sense. Like for me to say, right, do you realise that every minute as we speak, a woman, I know this can happen to men too, but it's probably more prevalent towards women, right?
Yeah.
They are getting beaten up, domestic violence. As we speak, right, a child every minute or so is getting abused. Yeah, you're
Agree.
here. Yeah, you're here chastising me about what I'm doing to kids, mutilating them. Like, don't you see that you're wasting your time? But they don't. So as of late, I've become petty. So because
Welcome.
I'm eventually gonna leave Twitter anyway. So if they're gonna, so I'm gonna be a bit petty.
I'm gonna be there with the cockroaches, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I recently had someone in my DM. It's like, I don't have kids. It's like, oh, how would you like it if I was to mutilate your children in front of you? And he was being transphobic. I didn't reply
How
to
would
it.
you
I
like
just
it?
looked at it and I was like, typical.
And
It's
I
like,
think the thing that
What kind of
we're seeing
message is
now
that to
that's
send someone?
been that's because I formerly a couple of jobs that ago now, but I used to work. I used to run a young women's project for Together Women in Sheffield, and in the women's sector, as much as some vocal online transphobes would have you believe otherwise,
yeah,
generally the women's sector was either actively inclusive or wanted to be. The majority of the
Yeah.
women's sector, what wanted to know more, wanted to be better. If they they weren't actively excluding people. They just didn't know what to do to say this is a space for you and to actively welcome people in.
Yeah.
But we've
Because, like-
long seen the similarities between it's like, this is the same people attacking trans people and cis women. These
Yeah.
are the same things. And and ultimately our role is to support people, and that, and we're not down with that. And we've seen that so blatantly this week with Meta, because when if you look at their updated guidance, we've focused on the LGBT part of it, but they've also included that it's perfectly fine to refer to women as property, and so as much as they're now allowing all of the officially allowing, because they didn't really do anything about it before. But now they've updated their policies to explicitly allow abuse against LGBT people. But they're also allowing abuse of women. And we've said for a long time that these two things have gone hand in hand. And this trying to pitch women versus queers is a completely false narrative.
Yeah.
That is
However
demonstrably
long-
so as well. Like,
Yeah.
it's because, like, and you say, like, with the women's shelters and stuff, like the people who are actually out there doing fucking work to help people, and I'm not counting myself there, by the way. I'm a shithead online as well. Like, I'm not doing fuck all, but the people who actually are there tend to do that because they want to help people, which means that, like, the reason and marginalized group tend to blend into each other anyway. Like, they want to help people who are marginalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first joined, when I was back at Say It, when I first joined them, I was working on their domestic abuse project. And during the course of that project, I delivered training to, I think it was 96 or 98 organisations through that time. And genuinely, in the whole of that time, speaking with hundreds of women working in the women's and domestic abuse and housing sectors, I can count on one hand the number of anti-trans people I met in real life. You go online and you have got a handful of anti-trans people who are very loud, who are very vocal, who are terminally online posting constantly. But
They're fucking
but
disturbing.
they claim to be the voice of women. They're not at all, and in such a minority, but they have such a dominance in the media and in the spaces that they are in, that they give the impression of being much
Like, that's what you get for
more
not having a
dominant than they
fucking
actually
life.
are.
Yeah. Do we like this is just my opinion, right? Of all of the fucking turfs, right? And I could be wrong in my opinion here. The only reason they act the way they do and they are so loud is because they they don't have to worry about a thing. And what I mean by that is, all they need to do if they get in trouble is want to flipping mommy J.K. Rowling and she'll bail them out.
It's such a
So they
fucking
don't
con.
worry because they can run to her for money. Because that's what she seems to have been doing for the past 5 years. I've got nothing better to do, so I'll just use my money, my platform. If you get into trouble, oh, don't worry, I'll bail you out. And it's like, that's what we've got to.
And I remember one of the things that was really stuck in my head, number of years back when I worked at the Women's Centre. We'd had an issue with a local group, a couple of women who were known to us for their anti-trans views, but they were also incredibly anti-sex work, and they were constantly on this thing about trying to ban the local strip club and stuff. And we had a visit from a brilliant group in a UK-based group called the Sex Workers Opera. And they are a group of sex workers and allies. They don't, for fairly obvious personal protection reasons, disclose who is who. But at any given point, the group is always made up of at least 50% people who are actively engaged in sex work, and they go around, do performances and deliver these workshops. And they came into our centre and did this workshop, and we got one of the anti-trans, anti-sex work group. The only one of them was willing to attend, and we said, you come down and actually speak to these people who you are campaigning against, and see, they are real people with values. And there was this one exercise that we did, which was, if anyone's been in sort of youth worky type settings, will recognise these type of things. We all had to stand in a line, and it was take one step forward if you've ever done a job that you disliked. Take one step forward if you've ever done this. Take one step back if you've ever done that. And basically, it was showing about sort of what inherent privileges that you have that you may not consider. And by the end of it, there was a sort of bit of a spread at one end of the room. And this one woman from the anti-trans, anti-sex work group, who was just stood at the other end of the room, she'd never had to worry about whether she could pay a gas bill. She'd never in her life had to do a job that she didn't want to do. She'd never. And even when it was presented that starkly, even physically, in a, that she's physically stood on the other side of the room, she just couldn't get her head round how that had influenced her experience, and how, people saying to her, look, this is your experience is wildly different, which is fine, but you listen to the lived experiences of the people who are physically stood in front of you. And she just couldn't get her head around it. It was so sort of ingrained. I think you've got a large proportion of the anti-trans groups who are in that space who just don't have the personal experience to have any form of empathy. It just hasn't entered their world at all. I do think you've had some others who've been radicalized, who've had very poor experiences. So where you've had women, for example, as you mentioned, who've experienced domestic violence or sexual abuse, who are very vulnerable, and then they see all men as being a threat, and the transphobes have gone, well, these are just men in dresses, they're just as threatening as any other man, and they've managed to take advantage of their vulnerability and sort of draw them into that way of thinking. And I think in my experience, most would fit into one of those two categories.
I
would argue.
I think on our last podcast, episode, because we obviously had to push it. So our first one of the new year, I think it was in that one. And I said something, and something that you just brought up, Heather, like I also mentioned in that one. I was like, okay, so I'm going to use me as an example. So with what I experienced, right, going through abuse and all of that. If I took my experience and I looked at 1,000 men, or if I looked at all men, the way I viewed my father, right? And I just said, oh, all men are abusers. Like, first of all, that's not true.
Yeah.
Because as I said, there is a small section, very loud section, where they will do despicable things. They will beat women, they will abuse children, they will do all sorts of things. If I blanket all men are all dangerous or all evil, then what sort of messaging is I sending to young girls who, okay, yes, I completely understand if a woman is being sexually assaulted, I understand her frame of mind. I understand that she will view, in her mind, she will view all men dangerous. I completely understand that. But if we go around accusing all men of doing something, what kind of society will that bring up?
And I think it's about not doing the whole not all men thing, because that equally is not helpful. It is very clearly a strong gendered aspect to domestic abuse and violence, but it is different to apply that individually to every
Yeah.
single individual. So you
Exactly.
can, you know, the two things don't have to be in conflict. Like you
No.
can absolutely recognize how heavily gendered domestic and sexual violence is
Yeah.
without doing, you know, that
Yeah.
sort of
Without alienating all
Sandris,
men.
anti-trans, you know,
Yeah.
everyone that doesn't fit your specific picture of womanhood as being somehow inherently evil.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah, it's
those
kind of
and
fucked.
those two things can hold together. That's not,
Yeah.
you know, they're not in conflict.
Exactly. But coming from the transphobes' point of view, you know, from their mindset, they think that they don't see that. They just see like men are all men. It's
Yeah.
like no. Like also, I know that men, that cis men, overwhelmingly commit the vast majority of sexual offences. I get that, but
Yeah, yeah.
cis women also commit sexual offences as well. So
Yeah.
it's like, so you can't say all men. And whenever I mention that in a Twitter, say like, or I say all men, but then in brackets I say not all men, right? Because it's like differentiation. Like women, what about women?
Yeah. And it's why,
So
you know, that's not how we apply safeguarding. So
no,
like when we do DBS checks for our staff, we DBS all of our staff,
yeah,
regardless of gender. Not we
exactly,
don't just DBS check the men because, oh,
Yeah.
well, she'll be okay because she's a woman. You know, that's not how it works. You apply it, you know, you apply safeguarding to everyone. You don't apply
yeah,
it
Same
just to one
thing.
demographic.
Same
And
thing with like me having to. I have to constantly update my like proof that I haven't fucked someone I shouldn't be fucking. Or raped or done any weird sexual shit,
yeah,
especially with children, considering I'm a teacher. Like I have to instantly
yeah,
update that shit and have it into my bosses.
yeah,
yeah,
I've always had to check mine, and that's the right thing to do is to check
Yeah,
everyone to obviously make sure that they don't have any
I
offences
work
or
with
any
fucking
history that would make them unsuitable for working with children or vulnerable people. But we do that for
yeah,
everyone,
yeah,
and you look at the other sides of that where it's been less overt as it is currently. But if you look how this ideology has been sort of ingrained into society, you look at certain career paths of, you know, and I know that disproportionately we look at sort of equal pay and things where
yeah,
it's normally women who are on the poor end of things. But if you look at certain
yeah,
pathways, I know you mentioned being a teacher. In the UK, there are massively underrepresented men in primary school teachers because it's been so inherently put through society of, oh, a man that wants to work with young children must have something wrong with him, and
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah. It's the same in Sweden.
and so they've been steered away from that career path. And so I'm sure there are plenty of men who would be great primary school teachers, plenty of men who are, but they don't. And
Yeah,
so you can see that some of these more more subtle areas have been really, really embedded into society. And what you see with the TERFs or gender criticals or sex realists or trans, whatever they want to be calling themselves currently, is they're
sex
building on that
realism.
sort of
I
basis
love
that's
the
been really embedded and taking it
yeah.
to real extremes.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love the people who call themselves sex realists because they just prove that they are just as much of fucking ridiculous brain-dead idiots as the race realists.
yeah. I recently,
Like
I recently,
they're
yeah,
the people who like fucking would write the bell curve. Oh wait, they fucking did write the bell curve for sex realism. It's called the fucking cast report review,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
which I had a
They
debate on,
don't.
by the
Yeah,
way. That
I
was a
don't think
nice
they
one.
even get the irony. But I mean, there is also
No, it just makes me happy.
there is also a very large overlap with, you know, the number of times I've seen something transphobic posted, and I've clicked on their account to block them, and then gone, oh, there's a whole mess of racism and other bigotry here as well. You
don't
tend to
have to
find
be
that,
a racist to be a transphobe. Like,
yeah,
it's I don't know. It's like, because the arguments are the same,
yeah,
and it's
Yeah.
fucking absurd.
You
Like,
see-
it's just you don't fit into my weird myopic version of femininity.
yeah. It's like, if you look
fucking
at
bury
the
yourself, you cunt. I
yeah,
don't
if you
care.
look at the whole nonsense debates over trans inclusion in sports, and you look at who overwhelmingly have been the people who've been impacted, it is predominantly women of color.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, because they are not perceived to be some Western ideal of femininity, and so they've been disproportionately targeted. And and like I say, you look at all of those, that they one form of bigotry comes hand in hand with another, and it's very rare, if ever, that you will find someone who's just I'm just really single-issuely really hate this one group, but then I'm really grand with everyone else. It's not it's not how it works. You don't get someone who is generally a nice, decent person, but then just really terrible to one group.
It's like
Oh,
the real
I've
side.
been watching.
Yeah, go on, Max.
Yeah, I've been watching. Fuck. There's this YouTube channel who does retrospectives on old sitcoms. Jose, I think I've mentioned him like 4 or 5 times earlier in this podcast history, because I really fucking like that shit. Because retrospectives of old sitcoms is like that's the shit that I eat up. Like that, in wrestling is like, yeah, yum yum yum, feed me the trash. But this little trash panda has just been watching All in the Family, if you know that.
No.
All in the Family is like,
I only know All in the Family as a Corn song.
oh,
Just aging me with my teenage new metal references.
oh, I love that. I love that. I'm gonna hop off this podcast right away and start listening to dope. But yeah, but All in the Family was like this show where Archie Bunker and it was a working class family in America, and it was really new, because like it was groundbreaking, because the point was that the main character was a bigoted piece of shit.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like that show does such a good job on showing, first and foremost, how that happens. Like, him being marginalized is one of the reasons that he starts like believing things about others.
Yeah.
And also like basically being tricked by capitalism. And it also shows that like bigotry doesn't, like you say, bigotry doesn't come alone.
No.
It works hand in hand, and it's all like integral to each other. And if you start breaking one of them apart, like the whole fucking air castle crumbles.
Yeah, and it's like we said before, that when it's sort of saying about the transphobes, is that you tend to find there's one of the other. It's either people with power trying to maintain and grow their power.
Oh
or
yeah.
It's people who are incredibly vulnerable, who've had that vulnerability taken advantage of. So if you look at my mind's gone blank now. There was a dramatization recently of Hope Not Hate's exposure of National Action. And I'll remember in a bit what it was called. It was really good. But that showed how basically this young man who was unemployed, he didn't have much in terms of education or employment prospects. He was, struggling to make ends meet, and how they gave him an easy target and going, so instead of going, well, actually, you weren't invested in, and you should have had better opportunities. They've gone, oh well, if it wasn't for that Asian family down the road, they've all got jobs, they've all got a house, they've all got the things that you've want, therefore they must be taking it away from you. And they were able to play on this young person's vulnerabilities and give him someone to blame. And it showed really well the process of how he was radicalized, and you can see that that process play out in a lot of circumstances. But one of the things that gone.
There's a film that I don't like because I think it's a sappy piece of shit, but it's really good at showing that. American History X.
I'm aware of it, but I've never watched it.
Oh, it's a really fucking it's a piece of fucking garbage, but it's but that's like my I want to watch an actual film and not have a lecture. This is my keep politics out of my movies at the moment.
Yeah.
No, but it's just like if you're already convinced that you shouldn't be a Nazi, it's kind of like you're preaching to the choir. No, it's I didn't need to be told that because I didn't turn out to be a Nazi. But it's really good at showing that, like, first and foremost, the people who recruit you are either spiteful and like does it to keep their power, or they are just as brainwashed as you and believe it, and therefore it's really fucking effective because they believe the shit that they're selling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, the sad thing is, right, because these turfs always talk about, oh, you are grooming kids and all of that, and it's like the really sad thing is, and I genuinely do, even though I hate their guts for what they do, I genuinely do feel sorry for them because they can't comprehend or realize that they themselves are being groomed.
And I think as a tactic, it's a tactic that we've seen. I think I've probably said this before, but it's a tactic that we've seen used before, and sadly quite often successfully. But it's like it always reminds me if you go on to if you looked at Britain First social media for some reason, you'd see them posting pictures of like, oh, look at this poor scabby abused dog. If you think this is wrong, join Britain First. And it's like, well, why? You're not an animal rights organisation. You're a bunch of racists.
Yeah, that's the funniest. That's always
what
been
you'll
the funniest fucking shit.
Is there's a tactic of attaching themselves to something that is uncontroversial or can't be argued with. So by doing that, it's like,
holistically good.
What you want dogs to be abused, do you? Yeah, and that is with the transphobes. If they were just attacking trans people, then most reasonable people would go, stop being arseholes and stop attacking people for existing. But suddenly, as soon as when they go, oh, but they're paedophiles and groomers and sex offenders,
the
majority of people think paedophiles and groomers and sex offenders are wrong, and therefore it's perfectly okay to attack them. So it's that relabeling and that attracting, and then suddenly when you argue against them, instead of going, you're arguing against bigotry and abuse and bullying and harassment, it's saying, oh, well, you're standing up for paedophiles and sex offenders and abusers. And it prevents people, or, in a lot of cases, from arguing against them. And it is, even when you look at it and you can see how transparent it is, it still has that chilling effect.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to be labelled a supporter of child abuse. So it takes the wings out of that opposition.
Yeah.
And it's really fucking it's pernicious as fuck.
Because whilst we're in the latter end of last year, and we won't go into detail because
you mean the Nightmare from Hell?
Yeah, because I think Max might still be in the process of dealing with it. But Max had a situation where she had this one person accusing her,
I got
Right.
wrongfully accused,
Yeah, and um,
and not in a fun,
yeah, and
fucking
because of her
parody way.
work, she also
Wrongfully
took that
accused is
name
also a great
Puberty.
parody of The Fugitive.
Yeah, and so
Which
she obviously, put something in motion. I don't know if that's still being done, but it's like,
I'm in speaks to my legal advisory. Let's say that.
yeah,
We're talking about how we're going to deal with it. I haven't
yeah,
heard shit from that motherfucker since he started realizing that I was actually being fucking serious.
yeah. It's like, this is, like, this shouldn't have to happen. Like, no one should have to
Yeah.
think about taking legal action
It's
over
a pro tip.
something that,
Don't accuse the psychotic bitch.
And,
or,
and and there
Will
is the
go the
thing of
extra
like
mile.
trying to throw enough mud and seeing what sticks. I mean, if you
yeah,
take it back to what you were saying with the US anti-trans bills earlier,
yeah,
like
Yeah.
the amount of bills, the number of bills that are being put through is absolutely unprecedented, and lots of
Yeah.
them are being unsuccessful. But they've got the tactic of, well, if we just keep putting them in and putting them in and putting them in,
Yeah.
the more that we do, even if our success rate is really, really low, if we
We will
just
still
put
move the
enough in,
goalpost.
we'll get some of them through. And we're seeing it in the UK in terms of legal actions. So there have been, the past couple of years, there have been so many legal cases on, oh, I've been unfairly dismissed for being a transphobe, or,
Yeah.
whatever it may be. And they are still, in the majority, losing those cases. But they have, one, the sheer number of cases that they've brought, obviously some have gone through, but also they don't even necessarily care about winning them. It's about tying people up in the process. So if they
Yeah.
can en masse be bringing legal cases against LGBT organisations and against LGBT individuals, they're taking our time and our money and our resource on fighting that. And every time they do that, we're spending that on fighting with them rather than supporting the communities that we want to be supporting. So,
Yeah.
so effectively, they get a win just by bringing a case, even if they ultimately lose it. Yeah, and then we know how they then go on to misrepresent. So, if you look at
They're a
the
bunch of fucking
case of,
liars.
like, if you look at the case of Ann Sinnott, who took a legal claim against Stonewall. So Ann Sinnott, for those who don't know, was one of the founders of the so-called LGBT Alliance.
Jesus fucking
And
Christ.
she took a
That's
legal
fucking-
case against Stonewall, saying that they were misrepresenting the Equality Act in their training and publications. And the judge in that case took one look at it and threw it out. He wouldn't even hear the case. He threw it out as being without merit. But she will still pour all over her social media and in public statements that she brought a case against Stonewall for misrepresenting the Equality Act, which she did. That's true. She
Yeah.
doesn't follow it on by saying, and it was thrown out. So even just by
It's
bringing
technically
that,
true, so it's
yeah,
so
and
it's
we're in a time
reasonable
on
for me to
social
put
media
out.
where people don't read past the headline.
Yeah.
yeah. It's like, as you mentioned at the start, like, we are 13 days into the new year, and I don't go on this website all the time, but now every now and again, I'll go on the the trans legislation tracker every now and then. And so far, there are 160 bills.
It's bleak that that should exist. Jesus
Yeah.
fucking
There's
Christ.
160 bills in 27 states. None of them have passed or failed yet, but there's 160 active. And we're 13 days into the new year.
Yeah, it absolutely.
Could all acquaintance be forgotten, never brought to mind?
I remember seeing a similar US one that was tracking the number of shooting victims. And again, just absolutely frightening, because so many that just weren't even hitting the media at all, because there were just too many. And like this, we'll see mainstream media discussion of a handful of those bills,
Yeah,
if that. But the vast majority of those 160 bills will not have even been mentioned in the media. Certainly not this side of the pond.
no,
Yeah, so they're going through without any sort of public scrutiny. Like people can't even object to something that they don't know about.
exactly. And it's like not, and you know, we haven't even, and you know, you know, half hour into this recording. It's like, and we haven't even touched upon the puberty blocker ban. And it's like, so what is that? I have to laugh because our government is an absolute mess, always has been. But it's like, what are they doing? You have Wes Streeting, who is a gay man, right? So he knows it, right? Pushing for this ban. Does he not know that you know it's not just trans kids that use puberty blockers? But it's just a fucking mess. Seriously.
He,
He doesn't
I
care.
mean, he is very much aware. I mean, certainly, healthcare and the puberty blockers ban is a mess, and we've all put out sorts of statements about that.
Yeah.
One thing that we have seen change, and you know, it's difficult to paint everything as doom and gloom, but
Yeah.
for the past number of years under the previous government, working in the LGBT sector, we weren't in the room. Like they were
Yeah.
not, they wouldn't even to disagree with. They just wouldn't. The previous government got to the point where they just would not communicate with us at all. We've had, as a sector, more meetings with government in the past 6 months than we have in the past 6 years. And in some areas, that will be helpful and beneficial. In some where we are absolutely at odds, we can at least tell them how at odds we are and put our point across, even if we don't agree. And, you know, so I think that's one thing to recognise, trying to find a thread of positivity. And I think there is some things that will, you know, healthcare is an issue at the moment, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
But there are some other areas where, you know, we are expecting to get a conversion therapy ban through eventually after years and years of being promised. And it looks like that is now going to happen. We are
Fuck
going
yes.
to see, we have an issue in the UK around unequal hate crime legislation, largely just because it's different bits of legislation that was written at different times.
Yeah.
So you've got, for those who don't know, under our current legislation, some characteristics are aggravated offences, some aren't. So if you were prosecuted for a racist attack, that would be an aggravated offence. If you were prosecuted for a homophobic attack, it wouldn't be an aggravated offence in its own right, but it would qualify for some enhanced sentencing under the hate crime provisions. If it was an attack on another characteristic, it may not get any protections at all. So it's really legislatively messy. And it does look like they are going to equalise that and put that through. So that's something, again, that's positive and relatively, while I'm sure the transphobes will have something to say about trans being included in that because they have something to say about anything that could benefit trans people. It largely is uncontroversial. It's quite similar to when the Equality Act was brought in 2010. That predominantly wasn't actually new legislation. An awful lot of it was bringing together the former Disability Act and Race Equality Act and different bits of legislation and bringing them all together and equalising them. And that's largely where we're at now with sort of hate crime legislation, is they're looking at doing that. So there are some, it can be difficult to see because we see all of the negative things. We see the puberty blocker bans and we see, you know, and that, but there are some positive things happening.
That's good to know.
So it's trying to find those glimmers of hope. I think the other thing that we've had in the UK is that everyone was so invested on get the Tories out, get the Tories out, get the Tories out. And there was almost this perception that as long as we just got the Tories out, then we'd wake up the next morning and be rosy, which was always going to be an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah.
And so trying to sort of adjust from that to go, things are going to take time. So if we look back, we always look at the example of the repeal of Section 28. So that was, for anyone listening, watching who doesn't know what Section 28 is, that was the piece of legislation that was brought in under Thatcher that it had some awful wording about banning the promotion of homosexuality as a pretended family relationship, but it effectively was the legislation that banned any discussion of LGBT issues in schools.
Yeah.
It was Labour who repealed that.
That's your fuck the kids.
But when Labour repealed it, it was actually when they had been in power for 6 whole years. It was their second term. So they didn't come in and get rid of it on day one. They didn't get rid of it on year one. It was 6 years into their parliamentary sitting. So, you know, there is an element of, there's some stuff that we just really can't, like, you know, the puberty blockers as being an active attack on our communities. And so there is a really serious issue there. But I think with a lot of the other stuff that we're contending with, there is a point of going, some of these things through our systems take time and will take time to, you know, and particularly with how much the Tories, as a sort of tactic on their way out the door, they threw so much crap at us in their last couple of months, and knowing full well that it would take years to undo. And that's kind of where we're at the moment, is that we're seeing in a lot of areas, we're just trying to undo the last few months of the Tory government to get us back to a sort of status quo. But there are, like I say, there are some positive noises, you know, wow, you know, that undoubtedly, you know, I can't in any way justify the puberty blockers ban. Even take away that it's about trans people, it's about children, about the impact, the huge impact that it's going to have on people, the fact that it will cost lives. The precedent that's been set for a minister to be able to override clinical decisions, like, that should not be the case. Like, what? Yeah,
based on a review,
I'm not aware.
Based on advice, of a review that says that you shouldn't use puberty blockers on people under the age of 25. I want everyone to, like, just take that fucking sentence in. Under the age of 25. Who the fuck needs puberty blocker over the age of 25? You cretin as fuck.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't like Cass. I don't like her.
And actually, if for anyone who has, because again, we don't read past the headlines, I don't know how many people have read the cast review in its entirety, and it is undoubtedly, you know, terrible, for want of a better word.
I've read half of it.
But
I read it to a debate that I had on it, which turned out shit.
But even Cass did not recommend out and out banning puberty blockers. She was interviewed following the report and following the proposals to ban puberty blockers, and she was directly asked, do you advocate for a ban on puberty blockers, because that is how people are representing this? And she said no. So as awful as it was, even the Cass report didn't actually go that far. That wasn't within the recommendations of the Cass report. She did recommend further research. She did recommend exercising of caution, but she never ever explicitly advocated for a ban. So that is what we've done now, is far beyond those recommendations.
Yeah, that's
it is
so fucking
something
great.
that we're kind of stuck with because it was politically and legally and the way that it's been done.
Yeah.
But it was a huge report and something that I want to say Transactual. I might be saying the wrong organisation, but one of the UK trans organisations has gone through the whole of the cash report line by line and picked out that actually within the entirety of the report, you can actually pick out there are some good things in there, but there were things about the need to reduce the waiting lists. There were things about needing to be better connected with local services. So previously, under the old system with the Tavistock, everyone across the country was being directed through a single London clinic. And so there's bits where that's highlighted and gone, well, if everyone goes through a London clinic, unless you're from London, they have no connection to any of your local services for providing joined up support. So there's bits in there that are helpful. So if, so what some of the and I completely and utterly get the response of people who just go, we just want to put this in the fire. And my gut sort of agrees with that.
Yeah.
Or looking at it from sort of going, right, we've got this report. There is no political appetite at all to scrap it. So what is there within it that we can work with? And actually, if you go through the entirety, you can go through and pick out the good recommendations. And and that way you sort of you kind of get to go to the politicians. Look, you get to save face here because you are implementing cash report recommendations, but you're implementing the good ones. You know, so there is a way to do that. Like, you know, there are huge issues with it. I mean, it wouldn't pass an undergraduate university assignment. It would be thrown out for such poor sort of academic research.
It's just poor science.
Or even if almost by accident there are bits in it that we can use, and if that's the approach that we need to take, then you know, I think that sometimes we can shoot ourselves in the foot by being sort of
Too
trying to be
reactionary.
absolute purists.
Yeah, because sometimes being too reactionary, whereas, like, I mean, listen, I made that mistake before where I've been too reactionary, and then I've read the thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, I've been a bit too upfront with my reactions. And it's like with this cash report, like I said, I read half of it. You know, like there were some like I did see those like good points, but it's like it was the cash report for me was almost seen as a smoking gun from turfs. Look here, we've got it. It's like no, like you said, if you actually read it, there are some good points.
Yeah,
But,
they will just pick out.
Yeah,
and you know, I'll put my hand up. I'm picking out the good bits that support our side.
Yeah.
But for anyone
of
on
course.
either side to say that it was 100% good or 100% bad, that's not the case. I think overall, if you look at it in its entirety, I think it's incredibly harmful.
Yeah.
Or if you go, well, this is what we've got, I think you can pick the good bits out. But for anyone who goes, well, this just advocates for an end to all trans medical support or any support for trans people at all, it doesn't do that. You know, so it's if you need to misrepresent it to support your point, then it doesn't support your point.
Yeah, it's like, you know, one of its many drawbacks, and you know, it's like it heavily relied on anecdotal evidence. Now, here's the thing: anecdotal evidence is still evidence, but you can't base an entire article or an entire report.
But the mythologies in that evidence were flawed because they ruled out speaking to effectively to speaking with any trans people because they thought that they would be biased. speaking on their own experiences.
Yeah.
It's so fucking absurd.
and-
That
Or
bit
apparently
pisses me
speaking
so
to anti-trans
fucking-
people wasn't biased. You
Yeah.
know, so the mythology in it was flawed from day one.
Yeah.
You know, they disregarded 98% of evidence that was provided to them by applying such ridiculous standards. So I think it was it 98 out of 103 clinical reviews that they disregarded.
Yeah.
And they claimed because there was a threshold that wasn't met for them not being double-blind studied. And you're like, well, one, you couldn't do that because there would be some serious ethical considerations around a double-blind study. But also, even if you were to put ethics aside, it wouldn't be practical, you know, in terms of, you know, if you give someone testosterone and someone else a placebo, the person who's growing a beard is going to notice. You know, so it's not. So it's something that even if you put the ethics aside, it just wouldn't be possible.
Because like they have an actual massive fucking effects on you.
Yeah. So they use this impossible standard because they couldn't just go, oh well, we're going to throw out all studies that don't agree with us. So they applied that impossible standard and went, we're going to remove all studies which aren't double-blinded, which had the same effect. So, you know, it fundamentally was flawed. But one thing that we're seeing now, like with the puberty blocker ban, is CAS never advocated for a ban, but that is how it's being reported. And what we're seeing is we're seeing attacks in other areas. So we're seeing things happening in schools and education that are claiming to be based on the CAS report. It's like, well, how? The CAS report was a review of a clinical service.
Yeah.
You are a school.
It makes
you
no
are not a
statements
clinical
about
service.
fucking
You know, so this
education.
report does not apply to you. And I think one of the really important things to do at the moment is lots of people who claim to be acting on the recommendations of the CAS report actually aren't. So ask them. When they say we're doing this because of CAS, go, okay, where in CAS? Cite it. Tell me what page, what line. Where in CAS does it say you should do this? Because actually what we're seeing is the majority of anti-trans activity that is being done supposedly in the name of CAS isn't actually in there at all. They're just taking a blanket statement of the CAS report exists, therefore we can be shitty to trans people, and that's not the case.
Which is that's a really fucking weird leap to jump. Like, why did you do that leap, you fucking sociopath?
And even now, we're seeing even more sorts of worry and chilling effects. So, you know, Wes Streeton has banned puberty blockers. That in itself is horrendous. But what we are also seeing is we are seeing adult trans people in the UK who are now having their prescriptions for cross-sex hormones being withdrawn.
Yeah.
That hasn't been banned. But there is so much they've created a political climate where there is so much nervousness around providing any clinical support whatsoever to trans people. Even the stuff that CAS doesn't touch, that the ban doesn't touch, you know, there is nowhere at all that says it is not okay to prescribe adults their hormones. But we are seeing en masse that being withdrawn. So
welcome to this
huge issues of the broader impacts. Because the reality is that in the UK, it was virtually impossible to access puberty blockers already. I mean, there were young people who were accessing through private routes, but through the NHS, there were, I think it was 89 young people in the whole of the country, you know, which is such a tiny, tiny, tiny number. You know, if you read our media or the time it's taken in parliamentary debates, you'd think there were tens of thousands of young people.
Exactly.
89. You know, so this was a completely manufactured issue from the start. But we did have a lot of trans adults taking hormones. Or we did. You know, and now that is being increasingly difficult. And, you know, I've known I know people in my personal life who have been taking their hormones for years and are now having their supply course and being told, we know we've been prescribing you this for the past decade, but we're not going to anymore. And you're like, there is
Fucking
no,
hell.
how they justify
Welcome to this
that, I don't
episode
know.
of Staring into the Fucking Abyss with Heather, Torin, and Max. I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, it's like I know someone. I don't know that I've known them like I've known them online for like probably close to 4, maybe 5 years. So I don't know them personally, but they recently started their transition journey. And it's like they don't pay attention because they can't. They don't pay attention. I mean, they do pay attention, but they'd rather live their life.
Oh, I get that.
But it's like they recently started their transition journey, and it's like I don't know how it's been for them, but I know for a lot of people, it's horrendous. I mean, we can just look at what's happening in the US. People are literally leaving their state, going somewhere else because their child or their relative can't access the healthcare they need.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and it's this thing about saying that they're banning gender affirming care. They're not banning gender affirming care because they provide that all the time if it's to affirm you into the gender that they think is correct for you. So,
exactly.
As a sort of personal overshare, I was premature menopausal, so I started with menopause when I was 26, and I remember those doctors' meetings where they were straight away, without a bat of an eyelid, offering me HRT. With no indication that I wanted it. They sat there and told me that I could access, and they said, if you have any side effects, if you get, so say you get facial hair that's bothering you can get electrolysis on the NHS. And I'm like, on a personal level, I'm not bothered by that at all. I'm fair skinned, I've got a pair of tweezers, and I'm not bothered. Or I've got trans friends who are absolutely fighting to access that type of care and can't access it. But as a cis woman, you're practically trying to force that on me, because heaven forbid, as a cis woman, I should have the occasional wispy chin hair. That's not, that can't be condoned at all, can it? And it's so, we routinely prescribe gender affirming care where it is to affirm what is perceived to be the correct gender, for want of a better term.
I'm going to be being blatantly fucking honest. The reason that I'm not on camera right now is because I'm sick and I haven't been fucked to shave. Like, that's.
Yeah.
In all honesty, neither have I. But that little camera blare filter is a marvelous thing.
Yeah.
I have used that one on occasion. It's like, also I can't be fucked to sit up. It's like I'm just laying down for this entire fucking conversation.
Yeah,
but it's that thing about
once or twice.
But I think it's that thing about challenging this sort of false framing. So so when they say that they don't, that they don't support gender affirming care, yes, they bloody do.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like,
if you're the correct gender, ironically enough.
Yeah, that it being claimed as a feminist issue, and it's like, well, no, feminism supports bodily autonomy. I proudly describe as a feminist, and I've chosen to do what I want to do. Some of you can see I'm covered head to toe in tattoos.
Yeah.
I have had the autonomy to do what I choose with my own body, as I should be able to. And if you think of the tenets of feminism, it is around everyone having their own bodily autonomy, whether that is over body modification, whether that's over transition, whether it's over abortion care, and I just don't get the cognitive dissonance that is required to then claim to be a feminist, but then to spend so much time opposing bodily autonomy.
Yeah, it's like these people,
those two things don't match.
No, these people, like, if you say to someone, right, if you say, because a lot of these people don't really understand that gender affirming care was originally meant for cis women.
Yeah.
Well, then it was broadened to be inclusive. But it's
Yeah,
like, so women,
the same for
yeah,
most.
so women getting breast enlargement, breast reduction, cosmetic surgeries and whatever, that falls under gender affirming care because they're affirming their gender.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the same principle, but they can't wrap their head around it. And it's like, I think this is my 4th year on the Nuke Town X thing. In our 4 years, I've had one conversation with a turf. They were proudly a turf, but I've had one conversation with a turf that, and you might be surprised by this, that was actually respectful.
Oh,
They respected my opinion. They respected my differences with them. But we had a conversation. It must have lasted for about an hour, and it was respectful.
that was
And
weird.
at the end of it,
That
we
must
both
be
went
that
our
must have been
separate
a
ways.
fucking weird.
Yeah, and it's like, if you can do that, I don't care about your beliefs. If you can do that, then we'll get on,
Yeah.
right?
And
But
I think that's the thing. And one of the things sort of working in the broader equalities sector is there are issues where we don't always agree. As human beings, we don't always agree. That is fine. And everyone is entitled to their own beliefs and to live as they choose and to, live their life as they want. So for me, it's like, if you don't believe in gay marriage, don't marry someone of the same sex. That's fine.
exactly.
Where we
Yeah,
have an
yeah.
issue is where you try to impose that on someone else. If you do
Like-
not think someone should undergo gender affirming healthcare, no one's going to make you. No one is going to forcibly
Yeah,
transition
I
you.
think we said.
If
I
you
think we
think
said
that
this
is
the
not
last
right
time.
for you, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we said this the last time you were on. But like, if someone forced you to like get gay married, yeah, then I would completely agree with you. That's wrong. It's
Yeah.
it's a bad thing. Do not be forced to be gay married. That's correct, but you're not in
Yeah.
today's climate.
So
I'm really sorry,
So
but like the
you
fever
are
is
perfectly entitled to hold those views and to live your
yeah.
life as you choose, and no one is going to force you to marry
Yeah.
someone of the same sex. No one is going to force you to undergo
Yeah.
gender affirming care. No one is going to force you to practice a particular faith or belief. And if if
Yeah.
they ever did, we would absolutely stand against that. But you have to equally go. There are people who have other experiences, other beliefs, other values than you do, and they are entitled to exactly that same level of respect and autonomy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your beliefs aren't entitled to rule my fucking life.
No.
No.
I'm really sorry, but like the fever is getting the best of me, and I am practically falling asleep as we speak. So I'm going to have to be popping off.
Yeah, that's fine. I will. What I'll do then is I'll be in touch with you probably tomorrow at some point.
Yeah.
Um,
And Heather, it was great speaking to you again. Always lovely to have
Yes.
you on. I hope to have you on
Always
sometimes.
enjoy a good rant.
yeah.
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 Sounds. Hoping you'll pop on again in the future when I'm feeling a bit better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a great night,
hope you're
you two.
feeling better.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. But yeah, I mean, swiftly moving on because, like I said, I want to keep this under 2 hours.
Yes.
Obviously, for those of you who are not aware and who don't follow Heather, she formerly worked at Say It, but now she works at Consortium.
Yes.
So, do you want to discuss a little bit about that and your main role there?
Yeah. For those who don't know, so Say It is an LGBT youth organisation in Sheffield. So I used to run that, which I've spoken about quite a bit. And we were members of Consortium. So Consortium is the UK's LGBT non-profit membership organisation. So it's a bit of a different role. So rather than doing the frontline work, we support the groups who are doing the frontline work. So if you run an LGBT group in the UK, we'll help you in running that group. So that can be in terms of providing lots of sorts of resources, help around your governance, in your fundraising, in your policies. It might be in terms of where there is something where we want to have a shared voice. So, we were discussing earlier in this conversation the changes with Meta, a consortium. We are discussing with the sector, how we respond as a broader sector. A lot of the stuff around trans healthcare and the other issues so our role is in sort of bringing the sector together so that we can collaborate where we might issue joint statements. And we're also a specialist funder as well, so which we've only been doing for the past few years, but we've already distributed over £2.2 million in grants to grassroots LGBT groups in the UK, which now makes us one of the largest funders of LGBT causes in Europe, which isn't a reflection on how huge we are, it's a reflection on how small and underfunded the sector is, because we shouldn't be one of the largest funders after a couple of years. So that largely is what consortium's role is in sort of strengthening the sector and providing whatever tools and resources that we can to strengthen and develop the sector and help people in delivering that work. So my role specifically is randomly not particularly working with the LGBT organisation. So we have a memberships lead who does that. So my role is in partnerships. So I work with connecting anyone else who wants to work with the sector. So that can be really varied. So I might be speaking to funders, to corporates, to other areas of the voluntary sector. So anyone who wants to connect up with us. So that's largely what I do. So I look after the National LGBT Partnership, which is the partnership between the NHS and the LGBT voluntary sector that's looking at how we reduce LGBT health inequalities. And I also look after the LGBT fund, which is the bit that's trying to bring money into the sector and obviously do the grant distribution. So it's a varied role. It's definitely a change from working on the front line, but it's really interesting getting that sort of bigger picture perspective and seeing stuff. You can get very focused when you're in an individual organisation on sort of your immediate client group and immediate support needs, but you get to take that much sort of big picture view. So it's really interesting. I've been there 6 months now. I absolutely love it. My aim was always, I don't know if I mentioned it on the pod before, but I was previously for a lot of years, my LGBT sector work was my sort of side hustle, my sort of hobby, and I used to have a day job in engineering. When I had what my mother would call a proper job. And so I used to have a proper job with career prospects and a pension and job security and all that nonsense. And then I'd do a couple of hours a week, sort of LGBT youth and community work. And that was the bit that I loved. So it was always the dream to get to do that full time. And I got to do that at SAIS, obviously now working for Consortium. So yeah, the point of making the day job the gay job was that was the dream. So yeah, I absolutely love it. And I know I'm biased, but I get to work with some absolutely amazing people. So I am in while it's an incredibly challenging sector to work in, particularly at the moment with the sort of political and media climate, I absolutely love it. I wouldn't want to be doing anything else.
Yeah, well, I'll be putting everything that you just mentioned down below anyway. All the links to consortium, like your website as well. I also want to bring up something that I don't think we ever brought up before, but I went on your website again just to refresh my memory. But where did the drag performance?
Yeah, that's I don't get as much time to do that at the moment because I'm so busy with other stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
so for anyone who hasn't seen, I do drag as my alter ego anarchist. So if anyone wants to see my more glamorous persona with the wigs and glitter and makeup, yeah, have a look at my site. Originally, it came from I used to I was one of the co-founders of Sheffield Pride.
Yeah.
And we were a little voluntary group trying to put on a Pride event with next to no money. And so we're running fundraisers and doing events and doing different things. And I had and a queer friendship group that included various drag queens and stuff. And I sort of fell into it. I was like, well, if we don't have to pay it, we don't have to pay a DJ if I can DJ. We don't have to pay a drag queen if I can be the drag queen.
Yeah.
And so it came from doing that sort of grassroots fundraiser stuff, and just an inherent love of playing dress up.
Yeah.
And there's things that you can sort of do as a drag queen that you can't necessarily do in your other life. So in my professional persona, as professional as I ever get, like I might write a really serious article on body positivity, but Anna will just get a guss out and wobble it at you, and that's so you could sort of be more direct and more humorous with it.
Yeah.
And it's a really good sort of, it's good fun and a good way to just sort of have some creative time. Like say, the kid that never grew out of playing dress up. I have to say, as much as I may try on occasion, if you are expecting high kicks and death drops, that is not my shtick. If I did a death drop, I probably would die. I wouldn't get back up again. So
Yeah.
I largely, when I've got events, I sort of DJ and host and compare, or I'll host karaoke and bingos and do that sort of stuff. And I will leave the singing and dancing for those people who've got some rhythm and don't sound like cats being strangled.
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, it's incredibly good fun. And obviously, I have the full-time job, so it's something that I do decide as and when I get the chance. So it tends to be the typical LGBT History Month and Pride Month when everyone remembers that the queers exist.
Yeah.
That suddenly the bookings start flying in again. But yeah, it's great fun. But yeah, if anyone wants and only doing it part-time as well, like so I don't do like the commercial gay scene, I don't do hen nights, I get to sort of be quite choosy with what I do. So I'm like, okay, this is a fundraiser for a group that I really support, so I'll do this. This is for a campaign that I really support, or this is just a night that I really enjoy. So it's again, I'm really, really fortunate in that I don't think I'd enjoy it if it was I've just got like a weekly gig at a bar in town.
Yeah.
I think I'd lose the passion for it. So getting to just do it when it's the nights that I'm really into is really good fun. So hopefully I'm just talking about possible, because like I say, I only get to do it probably a few times a year now. I'm just talking about possibly a festival in the summer, and there's a after party event for a political group that I support. So yeah, I've not done it for a little bit, but I've not hung my wigs up just yet. So you'll still see a bit of Anna out and about on occasion.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, because I obviously I knew that when we first came on, but I didn't really bring it up, so I wanted to bring it up now because I think it's quite interesting. So you have you kind of have so many interests, right? You have your serious job with your background. Then you have obviously the stuff you do for Exposed Mag. You're a drag performer, a DJ, and it's like very multi-layered. And it's like and I find that interesting because I mean obviously we could if we could like be really serious, talk about serious topics, but I find that stuff interesting because, clearly, you love what you're
And
doing.
some of it looks wildly different. So that people will look and go, so you're doing this sort of really serious policy work, and then you're doing this drag performance, and then you're writing for a magazine. But ultimately, they are all interlinked because everything is around sort of LGBT rights and equality and just different ways of achieving that. And if a way that I can support that is through helping you raise some funds, helping you write a policy for your group, whether it's helping design a website for you or whether it's sort of hosted a fundraiser karaoke night, it's ultimately that's the thread that links them all, is that I will support the cause in whatever way I'm able to. But that's created, like I say, a really interesting life and varied life for me that sort of is just revolves around just campaigning for LGBT equality ultimately in whatever way that I can.
I used to do that with I used to do martial arts for 10 years, and that's what me and my Sifu and the martial arts academy we used to do that. We used to go to leisure centers or old library places, and also do seminars, raising money for NSPCC, Save the Children, and similar thing. Obviously, so
it's what you're passionate about, isn't it? And and don't get me wrong, it's people think that you sort of do charity work and equality campaigning and stuff entirely out of the goodness of your own heart and as for completely altruistic purposes. It's there's a huge element of self-interest. I as a queer woman, I want to live in a society that is safe, that is equal, where I have equal opportunities to everyone else, where I feel as safe as anyone else. So yes, I'm working, doing these things for the wider community, but I am part of that community. So it's not completely altruistic. It is, there is a good element of self-interest there. I'm campaigning for things that will benefit me. So I can't sit there and be completely pious of all of the selfless good that I'm doing for others. It's like I'm trying to make the world a better place for myself.
I think we will definitely leave it there, so we're not going so that we don't go over the limit. But
we'll just end and summarise on how self-interested I am. We'll just close it there. That's a good summary.
So this has been a really good catch up. Obviously Max had to dip out because she's not feeling very well. So, but at least she was here. It's been been a while, so we caught up. Talk about some serious stuff, and now end on something funny. And so again, I'll put all of Heather's links down below. So do check out her stuff and her work. And I mean, she's an all-round great person. She's really chatty, as you can tell.
Just by how long the episodes are when I'm on.
Really bubbly. She obviously knows her stuff, which goes without saying. So I would highly recommend you check her out. Follow her on Blue Sky as well. I'll put all of that down below. But I'm sure at some point we'll have you back on. I'll try and leave it longer.
We'll see what gets thrown at us because whenever I've been, I think, is this the third one?
This is the third time you've been on,
and we've sort of had like a 6-month gap in between, and there's always been chaos ensued in between.
I think
we'll see what the next batch of chaos throws at us.
So yeah, I think the next 6 months, maybe 8 months, like Heather said, like because because that seems to be our thing in a minute. We'll bring if there's anything that's fucked up that's gone on, we'll get Heather on because she obviously has some insights as well. So yeah, thank you for spending your time with us.
Always an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. And yeah, so that'll be it. So yeah, I will. So oh yeah, and one other thing, if you listen to this on audio, you can also watch the video on Spotify as well. If you can, leave us a little review, because it will help us out. You can also follow us on X on our podcast, although you can follow us on Blue Sky with the same handle. And yeah, like I said, I'll put all the relevant links down below where you can go. Make sure the first one you do is check out Heather's stuff first, and then you can worry about us later because what she does is more important. But yeah, that'll be it. And have a good evening. I will end the recording and then stop recording